Hey, welcome to Frank's Model Works. This is Frank. This has not been fun. I've been making the standalone airbrush video and I thought I was done with it. I went to render it, do a final render so I could upload it to YouTube, and it's 140 gigabytes long and it won't render. I can't even get it to render onto my computer, much less upload it to YouTube. So I'm going to have to break it up into component parts. So what I'm going to do first is, the first part of this video is going to be a demonstration of the types of airbrushes there are, and then I'm going to demonstrate them on a paint mule. Then the second part is going to be getting your first airbrush to work and what I think you should get for your first airbrush, and then getting it to work. That may or may not, depending on whether or not it'll render, also include troubleshooting common problems. And then the last video will be me cleaning the airbrush. I don't know how this is going to pan out, so it'll all be in a playlist, so you can watch them one after another, but hopefully this works out well. I usually do the introduction after I filmed all the content, but I've already filmed all the content, and I filmed an introduction for the 2-hour-long video, but then I can't get it to render, so now I have to redo introductions. I don't know if I'm going to do introductions on each one. They said this was going to be fun. And I'm learning the editing portion of it. It's not that the editing, when you have a file size that large, 140 gigs. Wow. And I even tried dumbing it down to 1080p full HD. It still wouldn't render it. So, I don't know. Hopefully this is going to work. If not, we'll have to figure something out. But first up is going to be a demonstration of each type of airbrush that we generally use in scale modeling, and then a demonstration of actually using them. All right, so we'll go to that right now. And here they are, all laid out in front of you. So when we talk about the use of airbrushes in our hobby of scale modeling, and not just specifically model cars, but any type of scale modeling you want to get involved with, you're basically going to be dealing with certain types of airbrush. Now, the principal characteristics are whether or not an airbrush is single action, where simply depressing the air nozzle, the air trigger, triggers the air, okay? That there is no adjustability of paint flow. This is just an on-off switch. The next would be a double action, where you depress the trigger and get air flowing, and then pull the trigger back, and you'll see the needle assembly moving, and it's moving in the front here at the nozzle, and that adjusts paint flow, fluid flow. Okay, so that's the difference between single and double action. The next significant difference would be siphon feed. Now this is siphon feed. This is a siphon feed airbrush. They are fed through this isn't the right, this is the, I don't even have any parts for this anymore. That's how old this thing is. Paint is drawn through a tube at the bottom of this cup, up through here, inside the airbrush, where at the nozzle it is mixed with air, atomized, and forms your spray pattern. That's going to fall on the floor, and I'm going to spend 45 minutes looking for it. So, depressing the trigger, as you can see, you see the needle moving in and out of the nozzle. Okay, that's the double action movement. The next type of airbrush that I want to show you is going to be the gravity feed internal mix airbrush. And the only single action airbrushes that I have are this Pache H. I might do a demonstration of this, what it does, but it's hard. My other double action airbrush is this old Badger 200G. It's actually not an old airbrush, but it's a copy of one that I had when I was younger, so for sentimental reasons I wanted to get another one. But pay attention, Frank. A gravity-fed airbrush has a paint cup on the top where you put your material inside of here, and then just by way of gravity, it goes into the fluid nozzle where it's atomized by the air, and you have your spray pattern. Now, the next characteristic we're going to look at, all of these have the common trigger that we're used to seeing on airbrushes, not on paint guns. There are airbrushes that still are considered airbrushes but have this trigger type, like the pistol grip design. This is actually a pistol grip from Iwata fitted onto a different company's design, but this company, gsicreos, and Iwata have a lot of interchangeable parts, and I'll get into that in a little bit. So that's an overview of the general types of airbrushes that are out there. So again, we have single action, on-off button. External mix, the paint is actually mixed and atomized outside of the airbrush itself. So with this type of airbrush, any adjustment that you would make would be made here. And when I demonstrate this airbrush, if I can actually get it to work, I gotta see if I can find that Allen screw. Oh boy. Alright, so anyway, that's single action, and the next type is double action, where you press the trigger and pull back to increase the fluid flow. And here you have siphon feed versus gravity feed. Okay, with a color cup. And then this is the pistol grip type trigger. Okay, I'm going to pause for a second, move some of these out of the way, and go over which type of airbrush I use the most and the reasons why. So hold on a second. Alright, there's going to be a lot of jump cuts here as I set up for each demonstration, but the first one that I want to do is I want to set up a demonstration where I show you a rattle can and an airbrush. Just the difference in the control over what comes out of each nozzle, and also the volume of material that comes out of each. Okay, first up is going to be a can of Tamiya mica silver, and I'm going to hold it down for a second, full second, and you'll see just how much material comes out. (1001). So that was enough paint to actually change the color of the filter. You can see how much came out. The next up, this is a gsicreos 0.5mm airbrush shooting splash paints gunmetal, and the airbrush itself is set for it's going to be about 15 psi coming out. So I'm gonna hold it down for a second. 1001. That was more than a second. So just right there shows you the amount of materials that come out of each one, and why I choose to use an airbrush over a rattle can. Rattle cans have their place. It's just I like the controllability and the lower amount of material that I go through using an airbrush, and I like the controllability of it. So that's why I use an airbrush over a spray can. Next up, I'm going to demonstrate the different types of airbrushes and why I feel that the characteristics that I look for in an airbrush: double action, internal mix, gravity feed with an adjustable trigger, are the best choice for me in the things that I do in scale modeling. All right, so hold on, I'm going to set up for that. Okay, so for the next demonstration, I'm going to show the difference between what that nozzle size makes. It's going to be between a 0.5 millimeter double action airbrush and a 0.3 millimeter double action airbrush, using paints of the same viscosity and using the same air pressure. So that's going to demonstrate, and I've set the triggers to just about the same spot. This airbrush is also a 0.5 double action, but it's a pain in the neck to clean, so that's why I'm not going to be using it for this demonstration. But the characteristics carry over between the two. This is just more of a comfortable way to shoot a 0.5 millimeter gun. So I'm going to continue on these. I've set up a test mule body. That was an unfortunate clear coating accident, so it's been relegated to paint mule duty. First up, I'm going to spray some silver onto the roof so that you can see the pattern that the 0.5 puts out. So as you can see, that's a fairly wide pattern, diffused, no runs. It's lacquer, so it's going to dry pretty quickly. Nice and thin relative to what a spray can would do in that instance. So, and it lays down a nice, even, controllable coat. So now I'm going to be using a darker color in the 0.3 millimeter airbrush to show you the spray pattern of that. And then I'll actually lower I could probably go lower on the air pressure to get it even smaller. So let's take a look. So you see that it's thinner. But that's the difference, that there's 0.5, 0.3 millimeters. There is a physical difference in the width of the spray pattern. Let me see how low I can get this before I'm starting to sputter. So when you really lower your air pressure, you can get a pretty fine line, and that's just a 0.3. Keep in mind, I'm kind of contorting myself to film, but you have ultimate control over what you're laying down on the surface. Running out of paint. So I'll spray out whatever's left in there. So I was able to say that I still actually have a lot of paint in there. It's a profound difference in the amount of materials you use using an airbrush versus using a spray can, and even using a smaller needle and nozzle package. The control that you have and the material that you save makes it worth it. And when I sum up later on, I'll make some more distinctions. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a 0.18 millimeter airbrush, and I'm going to dial it down really, really low. Use a different type of paint called MRP, and show you how really, really tight you can get with these airbrushes. And hold on a second, I'll set up for that. Okay, I'm gonna get you in here as tight as I can with the camera to show you the 0.8 millimeter airbrush, how tight you can get your spray pattern. Let's see how close I can get. So hold it about there. I'm not even, you know, imagine somebody who was actually good at this, what they could do with this. I've said it before, my hands shake like a puppy pooping a peach pit. So, this kind of stuff is lost on me. But imagine this in the hands of a capable person. The controllability that you have. You could imagine doing exhaust shading, doing little shading on the mufflers, adding the blue, the amber, and the violet discoloration of on a muffler or a header, for example. Whereas with a spray can, you can't have any of this. No matter how you mask, you're never going to get that type of edge. And like I said, I'm not good at this. So, alright, the next demonstration that I'm going to do is of the single action Pipette airbrush. And we'll see what's involved with getting this thing to spray anything. And let me set up for that, and I'll be right back. Alright, so last up is going to be the Pipette H single action external mix airbrush. Siphon feed. To see the spray pattern up close. It's just putting out too much material, and it's not atomizing it well, so it's broken up and choppy. It's using a lot of material. trying to get a handle on the spray pattern, and it's been a long time since I've used this, so. I'm gonna clean everything up, and then I'll meet you back over there and we'll discuss. Now, before we go over and do the cleaning portion of the video, and not to belabor the point, I just wanna, I demonstrated using several different airbrushes, you know, the controllability and the control over the amount of material that gets sprayed out, and how you wind up using less material using an airbrush. And again, not to belabor the point, but by using a spray can, you know, you saw this, by using an airbrush, you saw the small pattern that we could get in the controllable pattern. And this is just a demonstration of how with a spray can from just about the same general distance, that's a lot of material. That's a wide spray pattern, and that's generally not as controllable as an airbrush. And like I've said before, I don't knock people for the methods that they use. I'm just explaining why I use an airbrush versus a rattle can. And there are times when I use a rattle can. There's certain colors that I like using, and rather than decant it, I'll just spray it. But generally, the reason why I use an airbrush is because of the controllability and because of the smaller amount of material that winds up getting sprayed. So that's that. That was a nice 1967 Chevelle SS body. One day I'll try to strip it down, sand it down, do something, make something out of it. But for now, it's pretty good as a paint mule. I have a couple of more 1967s. I don't know what it is about that year. 1967 GTX bodies that I use as paint mules. So it's good to, you know, rather than throw something out, or if you see a junk kit, somebody selling kits for at a show or something for $5 or $3 for a body, buy them and use them as paint mules to practice on. It's worth the investment. In my case, I make a lot of mistakes, so I have plenty of plastic lying around that I can spray and practice on. Okay, now that I've demonstrated the airbrushes, the next segment is going to be showing you how to get that first bit of paint to come out of your airbrush, which is usually the hardest thing. That's the biggest obstacle people have when they start using airbrushes. So I'm going to show you how to get that done. And then if all of this works out, the video after that will be cleaning the airbrush. Hang in there.